Holy smokes, that intro music goes hard, folks. Welcome back to Winning Hand, the podcast about Marvel Champions, one card at a time. My name is Boom Guy. Thank you so much for watching and listening, everybody. This is episode 82. We're talking about Frozen Solid today. This is the third episode of our deep dive into the Iceman hero, so thanks for continuing to listen through what is clearly the coolest hero of Wave 8. With me today, I have my usual co-host, who is also quite cool, Lazy Titan. How's it going, man?
Well, thank you. It's going good.
All right. We also have a guest, a man who needs no introduction, and he is somewhat retired, though still making content. The man all behind the Villain Theory brand, Mr. Villain Theory himself. How are you, man?
Good. I'm good. You know, it's funny. Last time we were going to record, I came down like a bit ill, and now I technically kind of have a cold, which I think makes me the coolest one here. You know, what better kind of time to get a cold than talk about Iceman? I feel like that's kind of what I'm working with here, so I like that. But I'm feeling pretty okay overall. Throat's a little funny, but we're gonna make it through.
Maybe you've been playing too much Iceman, got exposed to the cold too much, and now you have a cold. Maybe you were frozen solid. All right, see how far we can stretch this. That's enough.
We can get this pun farther. Let's go.
No, we cannot. We're done. Okay, so coming up, we are going to reintroduce ourselves, I guess, to our current guest, Villain Theory. We are going to read and discuss a listener email. I'm going to talk through a few recent ratings we've gotten. Then we're going to deep dive the card of the day and end off with some decks to share with you all. So this is going to be a good one. Before we get into all that, let me just remind you, the easiest way to support the show is to take 30 seconds to leave a 5-star review and a rating. Leave us a couple words on whatever platform you listen on, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever podcast app you use. And if you're on YouTube and you're watching my beautiful face, the easiest way to say thank you is to subscribe, like, comment, all the algorithmic engagement activities.
All the good stuff you know how to do.
Your favorite podcasters and YouTubers ask you about. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is crazy. So, you know, hit that subscribe, get us over the threshold. So to maybe entice you, before we get in, maybe to entice you to leave that 5-star review and that rating, I'm going to read a few recent reviews we've gotten on Apple Podcasts. Are you guys ready for this?
Yeah.
I'm so ready.
All right, we have one here that gave 5 stars and is titled Excellent Takes. It says, the podcast is a great resource for newcomers and veterans alike. Love the community deck reviews and commentary. Great, never inflammatory takes on all things Marvel Champions. A+.
Never
Great
inflammatory.
Takes. I am known for great takes.
When you said great takes, I'm thinking, I'm on here now. Maybe this is going to go downhill.
Ooh, going to drag us down. The next one says 5 stars. Titled Great for Beginners, says, I recently got into Marvel Champions, and this podcast has been a great resource to learn about heroes and cards. Keep up the great work. And the last one for today, we have another one, 5 stars. It says, always great content. Love your sense of humor. I feel more inspired and informed after every episode. Thanks for your time and work. You are welcome. All 3 of you are also excellent in my books. I would give each of you 5 stars if I could. If it only took 30 seconds to rate and review you, I would, but thank you for doing it. So if you're still listening to me rambling about reviews, just take a minute. Take 30 seconds. Rate and review us on whatever platform.
Just put a review in.
It's so easy. It's so fast. Okay, let's get into the episode today. We have a returning guest. So Villain Theory, usually, when we have a first-time guest, we ask a few questions, we get to know them, so our audience knows who they are. We've already done that with you. We're going to revisit some of these questions, but before we do, I have a pop quiz for you.
Okay.
Longtime listeners will know I'm a big fan of pop quizzes. I do love tangents. So we're going to jump in. You have been on 2 previous episodes, sir.
Yes.
I would like to know if you remember the 2 cards that you discussed.
Remember the first one was Phantom X. That was a really interesting, unusual card, quite a recent one. The second one is escaping me. I feel like I liked the card a lot, which is really annoying. But I'm going to have to say I failed that question.
Okay. The second one was Come Get Me, Bub.
Yes. Oh, how could I forget? I love that card.
Now can you tell me, for extra credit, which episode numbers those were? Do you remember which episode number that was?
Okay, this is insane, and I definitely aren't not going to get it right, but I'm going to feel like Phantom X was relatively like earlier on. I'm going to guess 21.
Okay.
And I'm going to guess Come Get Me Bub was like 49.
Oof. Close on both. Phantom X was episode 17. Come Get Me Bub was episode 51. So you're quite close.
Okay, he was pretty
Okay.
close.
Do you remember the scores that you gave those cards? So which score out of 10 did you give Phantom X?
I'm pretty sure it was a 6 or a 7. I feel like I've gone off that card. A little spoiler, I guess. Yeah, slightly. I think I give it like a 6 nowadays, but I feel like maybe I gave it a 7.
You gave it a 6.
Right
You
up.
gave it 6 out of 10. We both gave it 6 out of 10.
Spoiler warning for episode 17.
Thank you, Lazy Titan. Can you give us a spoiler for episode 51 too? Spoiler warning.
Spoiler warning, episode 51. We were going to reveal Villain Theory's rating. So if you haven't listened to that one, why are you here?
Yeah, go back and listen. Also, if you didn't listen to the episode, we had Bananas on, which was episode 60, 70 something. She has all of them listed in a spreadsheet. You can go back and find that. Okay, what score did you give Come Get Me Bub, Lazy Titan? Or Villain
Me?
Theory, excuse me, out of 10.
Now I want to know what score Lazy Titan has.
I didn't realize I was
given.
getting
would
pop
give it- I gave it. It would have been a 9 or a 10. That's kind of how I feel about that card. I don't normally give 10s out. Whenever I rate anything, a little bit behind the scenes when me and you did some campaign contest stuff, I feel like I gave like the lowest scores overall out of everyone there. I was very stingy, but I
You
like
were.
Come Get Me Bub. I like Come Get Me Bub. I'm going to say I gave it a 10.
You gave it a 10.
Yes.
You gave it a
Nice.
10. We will end the pop quiz there because you finally got one right. So I feel like that's a good time to kind of end the pop quiz. So we'll
And then
finish
I'll
it
win.
off there. And in a coincidence, the Come Get Me Bub episode was aired almost exactly 1 year to the day. If you're listening to this on release day, it is the 18th of November, 2025. And on the 19th of November, 2024, you were on Come Get Me Bub. So almost exactly a year.
I
and
want to say
also
it's intentional.
maybe another coincidence, Lazy Titan, you were on neither of those episodes. Amazing coincidence.
We
All
haven't
right.
spoken before.
I've never met this guy.
Let's speed run through a few questions for you, Villain Theory, just so people can reacquaint themselves with you, or maybe your views have changed. Who's your favorite hero to play in Marvel Champions?
Ooh, that's such a tough question these days. But people maybe watched a recent video of mine. They probably would have heard that it is still Psylocke. I like psychic weapons, apparently.
It used to be Star-Lord.
Star-Lord was like my favorite for years, and I feel like a lot of people still associate me with Star-Lord. And I still
Mhm.
do really like Star-Lord. But I played him so much across so many years. I've done all these different like Guardian ally things and different builds. I've played him slow. I played him with Rush. I still like him a lot, but he doesn't excite me the most anymore overall. So he's like maybe in the top 10, but he's no longer in like the top 3 or 4.
Does Iceman reach your top 10?
Iceman, I'm going to be real for the people here. He's struggling to get out of my bottom 10.
Wow. Okay. I know early on you were not a big Iceman fan, but that has not changed.
I like him more than I used to. I imagine we'll get some more of this as we go through the episode, but I kind of feel like I like most heroes I didn't like more than I used to. I felt there's been some interesting cards. One I haven't been so keen on is Venom. Like, he's fine. He just doesn't interest me. But Firepower is kind of interesting as he has weapons, that kind of thing. So everyone's always moving up a little bit. But if everyone's moving up a little bit, it's hard for people to sometimes change positions when, So I feel like probably of everyone you have on, and I could be wrong here, but we're on Iceman season, and I'm probably like the I'm not anti Iceman, but I'm probably the least enthusiastic about him in general.
Well, we have, this is a whole month dedicated to Iceman. So we did his hero card, and then we did a different card last episode. We'll do another card next episode. This one is Frozen Solid, so feel free to mix in some of your overall thoughts on Iceman as we go, not just the card, because I'm curious to hear. It's interesting that you don't like him, though. So that's a good balance of opinions here, because I tend to be quite a fan. Why don't you tell me quickly, what is your favorite aspect to play?
Oh, I really like. I'm more of a like specific card or like type of deck person, an aspect person. But if I had to pick one aspect, it's so difficult. Protection's so good these days. I think I'm going to tentatively stick to leadership, but it's very close between basically everything but justice.
And
I can respect
what is
that.
your most common or favorite player count?
Ooh, most common and favorite player count is going to be 2-player. I really like having 2 different characters. I still feel like each character gets to do a bit of everything still, because it's not so far like you don't have to hyper specialize, though you can quite a bit. But I like that you can specialize, and each character kind of gets to do their own game plan a little bit more than maybe in solo play. So that's my overall kind of thoughts there.
And then finally, favorite scenario.
Ooh, this is a tough one, and I feel like I don't have like a set favorite in mind anymore. It kind of rotates a little bit, but I'm still pretty keen on N7 from Age of Apocalypse, the
Mm.
second Apocalypse, also known unofficially in some circles as Apocalypse 2. And I really like how he changes form. And I almost feel like I'm fighting three villains in one, but not really. But I'm adapting to hugely different like stat changes and keywords. And sometimes that power counter goes off and he'll change at the start of the villain phase. And everything I kind of prepared for gets flipped on its head. So just as like a small degree at least, it kind of feels like someone else is playing against me. You know, they're changing form, they're trying to get the better of me, and I feel like that feels very dynamic.
Mm. That is quite a good scenario. Honestly, low key, that box may have maybe the 5 best as a group scenarios. Those are really, really strong. The campaign mechanic is nonsense, but the 5 scenarios are really, really strong as a set. I think I don't love Four Horsemen. I have to be in the mood for that one, I think, just based on the difficulty and how the game plays. But the other 4 I could play almost anytime. I quite like Unis. I quite like Dark Beast. I like Dark Beast a lot, actually. The 2 Apocalypses are both good. I think it's a really, really solid box.
It is, I think, in terms of like villains, but also heroes already. Like I enjoy them a lot. I know you have opinions on Bishop, but in terms of the scenarios, they are like in terms of any one box, my favorite overall. Unis is my least favorite, but I still like him a lot.
Hmm.
So yeah, really strong.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so why don't you tell the people, if for some reason people don't know who you are, why don't you tell us what you used to do, where we used to be able to find you, and all that stuff.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube. The channel name is Villain Theory, and there's videos there. They have slowed down significantly.
Mm-hmm.
With the odd kind of burst as it was,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm around that. That's probably the main place.
Now I know your super villain or superhero content creator origin story takes a lot of inspiration from Tony Tales.
Yes.
Are you going to take inspiration from Tony Tales' ultimate demise when you officially retire? Are you going to Tony Tales your channel, sir?
Yeah, so if the people don't know, Tony deleted like all of his videos, and it was like some of the best videos in my
Like
opinion.
overnight.
Yeah, no warning, they were all gone. We woke up and it was like he had been Thanos snapped out of existence and was never even there. Which, when you come to think of it in hindsight, like that is such a power move. Like, I'm gone.
Mhm.
You guys can't have this anymore, which is not his thought process. That's all. But like that was crazy. God, I would love to do something that impactful and dramatic and memorable, but I'm not. I'm going to be boring. The videos are there. I might end up. I've been thinking about like hiding a few of my old videos, like about content that wasn't even released, because it's now released, and I feel like maybe that's. I
Mhm.
sometimes get people comment on an old preview I did saying this has really helped me play this hero, and I'm like, but it wasn't out then. I'm not sure this is the best advice.
Mm.
But it's mostly basically all going to stay.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. Tony Tales, if you're watching this, and I know you are not, you're a legend. Okay.
Yes.
We have a listener email today, so I'm going to read this and we can discuss. I think it's got some interesting questions here. Okay. It says, Boom Guy, Lazy Titan, and Guest. I've been making a lot of decks recently, pairing Bring It and Man on the Wall, with protection card pinned down to profit from minions left alone on the board in front of the aggression player. It's been a lot of fun and feels like a really powerful way to play the game. With the announcement of Wonder Man, he's allowed to include in his deck any events from any aspect as long as they have the printed energy resource. So I'm already dreaming about building him in protection and including 3 copies of Bring It to draw and draw and draw. Now the question the people have been asking, what events are you excited to combine with a Wonder Man deck? Winning hands, not stinky feet. Love, football coach. I don't know what that sign off is, football coach, but I appreciate the question. So the question is, what events are you excited to combine in a Wonder Man deck?
I
Go ahead,
actually
Villain Theory.
Yeah. I technically did a video on Wonder Man, and in that video on Wonder Man, I listed a lot of my favorite ones, and now I have to remember them, which is the big challenge. But there's so many good ones. I think one that's kind of curious that I haven't really seen like talked about much is he can include Homeland Intervention, the shield event, which exhausts different shield things to remove threat. He can take that in any aspect. So you could like start exhausting the Triskelion and kind of have a multi-aspect kind of shield thing. I think it's kind of interesting. I think for me, what football coach is saying there about taking Bring It elsewhere is really fun. There's actually like 5 or 6 really minion oriented, like just aggression cards that you can bring into another aspect, and they all kind of synergize there. So I can take like minion summoning and bring it, but I could be in protection and have like hard knocks or change of fortune and different things as well.
Hmm.
So I don't know how this will appeal to the Red King, who I'm very glad I get to be on an episode with. But you can bring a lot of aggression with you into the other more passive aspects. So I think that's something I'm kind of keen to do.
Lazy Titan, do you have any thoughts on Wonder Man cards?
I was going to say pretty much the opposite. I was going to say that a lot of protection is in energy resources. A good number of those, I believe, Come Get Me Bub is. I know it's like a big theme for just that's like their resource. It comes up a lot, so you can use all those. I don't want to say overpowered, but all those really, really good protection cards in your other decks. So you can use Come Get Me Bub in a red deck, and so you can have the better minion getting card in the minion aspect, which is super fair.
I think those are solid choices. I really like a lot of this aggression stuff. I think there's a number of really cool events in aggression. Of course, Bring It, which is one of my favorite cards in the entire game, low key. But you'll pay for that as a fun card that you can bring in. I also really like Into the Fray and One by One and Relentless Assault. Spoiling for a fight is also an energy resource. I think there's a lot of really fun aggression stuff that you can take out of aggression and then bring into other aspects. The minion stuff is great. Like if you're in protection, you play Pinned Down, then you can have things like Relentless Assault and One by One. Spoiling for a fight, Take That even hits. So you can really do a lot of fun stuff there. I think some of those aggression cards are going to be a good time.
Yeah, something else I wanted to talk about just quickly is you can make weird cards work better for Wonder Man, because if he plays an energy event, he gets basically 1 healing and +1 to his basic attack. So you kind of get 1 damage and 1 healing on top of what else you get. And it's, you do have to be able to basic attack and so on and have room under Ionic Physiology, which is his attachment. It's a whole thing. But what I kind of like the idea of is you can take Foiled from Justice and Emergency from Basic. Those are 0 cost cards. Emergency reduces the amount of villain schemes for by 1. Foiled kind of blocks the booster icons when a villain schemes. And I can play these, like a couple of those 0 cost cards, maybe in multiplayer when scheming is more frequent. And I've prevented, let's say 2 to 3 threat. I've healed for a couple, and I've now got a couple of damage boosts set up. So there's like 0 cost cards that you can kind of like rapid fire, and which on their own maybe aren't worth it, but with his benefits kind of are. I think that's kind of a fun angle.
He also can get Aerial, right?
He starts with Aerial.
He starts with Aerial. Oh, so he's even better. So Yaw and Roll has an energy resource, which is a good one you can get into. He also can play Get Over Here. So if you want to collect minions, he can do that as well. So there's a bunch of good stuff.
Get a lot of the. Why am I blanking right now? I had a thing I was going to say. Never mind.
He can also play Bombs Away, another aerial one.
Yeah.
Which is really good AoE. So I think this energy resource thing is kind of interesting. Like when I first saw it, I thought, I don't know. Like, I don't know off the top of my head what all the resources are, but then when you start looking through, there's a bunch of really cool combinations you can do. And I think I'm generally not a big fan of mixing aspects. I think it kind of washes away what makes Marvel Champions special. When you start mixing all the aspects, I think keeping them contained in the aspects is good. I don't mind clever ways that kind of break it. I don't think Atom or Spider-Woman are particularly clever, though. But things like Cyclops or Cable or now Wonder Man, like very specific ways they can break, I think is interesting, and that I do get behind. So, well, football coach, thank you for dropping the question. We're always happy to discuss that as usual. Now, let's talk about what we've been playing recently. I'm gonna go first because it's my podcast and I can do what I want. Recently, I've been playing a lot of Deadpool. I quite like Deadpool. I started off very negative on Deadpool, didn't play him for a long time, had no interest. I think the character, as I've said, the character is kind of insufferable. The movies aren't as funny or clever as I think they are, but whatever. He has a whole vibe. But once I kind of got past that and got over myself and started playing Deadpool, I think he's got some really fun hooks, and I like his main hook of like not caring about dying and flipping. I think that's a really interesting mechanic. I think there's a lot of interesting ways to lean into that. I have been playing leadership and justice a lot. Those are, I think, my two favorite aspects for him. I don't particularly like him in pool. I think that's a bit just too much. I think he works in aggression. I think he can be good there, but I really like him in justice. I built a deck around great responsibility when we did that card, which I think is a lot of fun, and I still revisit that one. And in leadership, I like him. He's got a great sidekick build, I think. Cable is just an insane signature ally. But I think, I built a deck leaning into the other X-Force allies that I called Suicide Mission Leader, and built around the Mission Leader card and Uncanny X-Force, and really just blasting side schemes and letting Deadpool take all the damage for them because he doesn't care. And then you Cable and Caliban to fish them out, and X-23 kills minions. Like, they're just so good, a lot of those allies. So I've been playing a lot of those recently. Deadpool, I think, is a hero that I've really grown to enjoy, and he's definitely in my top half, probably top 20. He's high for me. I quite like Deadpool. How do you guys feel about Deadpool?
I'm not a big Deadpool guy. I feel like I enjoyed him the first couple of times. There's like a crazy novelty to him, but he skips a lot of like what you normally have to deal with in the game. Like, he just grabs the card to like 0, and it's just a little bit too weird for me. A lot of people thought I would love Deadpool because, I'm the Star-Lord guy. Star-Lord's crazy risky, but I feel like Deadpool's riskiness is less fun. A lot of it is acceleration tokens, and that's just kind of like a number ticking up slightly more. It's not like super dramatic, like I reveal this encounter card, what is going to happen? And the other kind of side of it that's risky for him is sometimes like the encounter card or like a boost effect will damage him and just like knock him out of the game. And I don't feel like randomly just losing out of nowhere like is also particularly fun. And obviously you can play around these things. I feel like the more you're playing around the riskiness, the less excitement you're getting from the riskiness. So I don't know how to describe it, but I do appreciate some unique things about him. But for me, I haven't had that kind of, whereas you started negative and ended up coming to like him more. I haven't kind of found that yet.
LT, where are you at on Deadpool?
I like Deadpool a lot. I was in the same boat as you. I was anti-Deadpool for a while because people solved the deck before he came out, and it was kind of boring and lame. But I think if you don't play that, it's pretty interesting. I like my favorite way to play him generally is just to die every turn. Is just to like never protect yourself and just tank the villain hits to the face. But he works in a lot of aspects. He's got a lot of fun things you can do. I've played him in red. He just has really good synergy because you have Moira McTaggart to flip up whenever you flip, because you're flipping down to not die all the time. You can then also, he's got his Chimichanga truck, so you can heal back up to full immediately. Chimichanga truck, also just a crazy card.
Such a good card.
So good that you can use it for anybody. But I feel like he's kind of weird in the, like, I don't know if he really even connects to Star-Lord, because I don't think he's very risky. Like, aside from if you play those, like, probably 12 villains that have a deal 1 damage to you in alter ego form, there's no real risk, because he's got I forget what it's called, but the card that ups the scheme's threat threshold by 2 per acceleration icon.
It ain't over.
That pretty much covers that. He can flip up and thwart for 8 for 1 or deal 8 damage. He's always got this card as fire, which is much more fun if you're not trying to OTK with it. But it's just kind of like he's got everything. There's no, like, the risk isn't there because, like, Star-Lord can die. So you're doing all this stuff and you're risking, and the risk is that you will die. Deadpool, you just won't die. And so
there are those
cards
out. Like you said, they'll deal damage or something. But the whole this card is fire thing, that before he even came out, I feel like everyone was like, oh, look, you just put a symbiote suit on him, you take a bunch of damage to deal damage, and then you play this card as fire to just deal that much damage again. And that's like not super cute or clever. I feel like the designers maybe wanted him to lean into that, but that's not very fun, I don't think. So I don't really ever play this card as fire. I think, to me, it's usually a dead card, honestly. But the other ones are fun, like a Woohoo, the one that thwarts, and the other one, Maximum, whatever it's called.
Effort.
The one that Maximum Effort, the one that takes damage. I think that's fun, and playing around with your health pool to like thwart or deal damage, knowing that you might die or you will die. I think that's
the fact that he can find all his cards whenever he needs them is pretty crazy.
Yeah, he can just discard.
He can just always discard a card to get it. So like it feels like he's built around this combo. But
Yeah,
also,
he's fun.
I've played him in red. I've enjoyed him quite a lot as just like basically like a rush hero where you just die and it doesn't matter, and then you run down the villain.
Well, Lazy Titan, since you're already flapping your gums up there, why don't you tell us? What have you been playing recently?
I have been experimenting with some heroes that I have not played in a minute. So
Hey,
I wanted to try
okay.
some cards that I don't play a lot, which means they're blue.
Ooh,
Not a fan. But
at
I
least they're not yellow.
played it's better. Maybe not. I played X-23 as a
Okay.
Sidekick deck because I had not played Sidekick, I don't think ever. So I was like, might as well try it. I've been wanting to play X-23. We'll see how it goes. Art is cool. Final verdict was X-23's really, really good and would have been better if I had not played Sidekick. But in general, I think I also did the build a little wrong. I went slightly Voltron with Honey Badger, trying to keep her alive and give her like 3/3 or 4/4 stats with Inspired and all the other stuff. Danger Room training, trying to basically make it so that she can deal an equivalent amount of damage every time she readies with, I forget what the card's called, but the one that readies you and your sidekick and then heals
Side
you
by side.
both. Side by side, that's the one. And then obviously X-23 has so much healing for herself and also has her regenerative thing that can heal Honey Badger. So you have a lot of ways to keep them both alive. I forgot that her obligation doesn't go away and just removes Honey Badger. So that was
Yeah.
my bad. But luckily you have Sisterhood so you can find her. So I think I'd probably cut all the other upgrades and just do Suit Up, Sidekick, and Honey Badger so that if you lose her, you can just flip down, shuffle her back into your deck, and then find it with Suit Up. That's all you need. And then, because her attacking for 1 or whatever is kind of all you need. She's readying X-23 is the big thing.
I still have yet to play X-23. It's one of those heroes that I have not taken out
She's
of the
mad
box
good.
and played yet. That's part of the reason I think I haven't. Generally, I stay away from super strong heroes. VT, what are your thoughts on X-23? Are you a fan?
I really like X-23 and I really like Sidekick decks with X-23. So this one speaks to me. Sorry, Deadpool. But unlike Deadpool and Iceman, there are heroes I'm positive about. And X-23, one of the things I like about her, a lot of cheap cards, you get 5 cards in hand. You're probably playing like 3 to 4 of those. So, you get to play a lot of cards. And because she's so kind of impactful, everything that sort of she plays is impactful, I kind of find. Especially her own cards that make her attack go crazy. I like readying heroes, which she is one of the best of, because I feel like the basic stats are so interactive with the card pool, and Sidekick and Side by Side is a prime example of how that can kind of go crazy. So I do particularly enjoy that. I do think, when I play Sidekick X-23, I don't Voltron up Honey Badger. I think Danger Room training is really nice. And if I can get something else on here, it's good, but I'm not overly worried about it. It's kind of my take on that.
X-23, very, very strong. The healing every time you play a card, crazy. But every time I play, not every time, but often when I'm playing the kind of like ready yourself a million times deck, I'm playing from the spot of I like Drax a lot. And X-23 is, if I'm going to be honest, maybe a little bit too much thinking for what I want that deck to be. If I play Drax, I literally just turn sideways and no brain play every card that says ready. The X-23, I have to sequence my ready with my Honey Badger activations, and I have to sequence when I want to use my claws and whether I want to thwart for my first activation because I'm a 2/2. It's a lot of thinking. It's fun, but if I'm playing like a no brain rush deck, I'm probably just going to go to Drax because I don't have to think. I don't have to think at all.
Drax is a little more straightforward. X-23 is kind of the answer to what if Tony had designed Drax. I think that kind of, to me, feels very much like what X-23 is. Villain Theory, what have you been playing recently?
I think the 3 most recent heroes I played would be Silk, would be Shuri, so a couple of new ones, and then I actually played the Iceman deck that I might be talking about a little later, so maybe
Yeah.
keep that one under wraps a little bit.
Okay.
But the Silk deck, I had to name it Silk Song. If you guys like video games, you already know why. But my partner, she was like, I want to play Mars Morales, and I was like, cool, let's do a Web Warrior thing. and I could take the new aggression Spider-Woman, a web warrior ally, that whenever a web warrior enters play, get to deal some damage. So that was a fun little combo there. But I'm not a big Silk person. Silk is the character from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. wave that I think I like the least overall. I still like her, but I'm a little bit. I love tucking cards. I love being able to defeat a minion, yoink, that's tucked under me, and now I can spend that to get these different benefits. Like, I love doing that. But her own cards I find a little bit weird. If I have her attack card, well, if I want to get full benefits, I'm going to need to have like an enemy from the right set as a card tucked under me. That's really bringing two things together. I just have to have the event at the right time that I want to use it. I have the right card tucked. I have the right enemy in front of me, and sometimes it's a lot to bring together. But she does have card draw. Ghost Spider can, the allies and things can help get certain events. But sometimes I just like, my deck to work. I think these days with so many heroes, I'm very sort of grumpy these days. I want my deck to be doing its thing. I want my cards to be working. And if I can, have it not work a couple of times, if a couple of turns go by and my deck isn't doing its thing, I feel like I could have been playing one of like 500 different decks across like 60 different characters, and it probably would. So I'm a bit grumpy about that, and Silk somehow makes me a little bit grumpy.
Boy, you guys are really killing me here. Silk is another hero I have not played yet, so I cannot opine on. I mean, I've seen them all played, in games I've been at the table for, so it's not like I have no idea what's happening here. I've seen Silk played quite a few times. One of my locals is a big Silk fan, so I've seen her play it a fair bit. But it's just, she doesn't, for whatever reason, I look at it, look at the cards, and I think, I'm just not super excited to try it, so I just haven't. This is ultimately a hobby, so I'm just going to do the things that seem fun to me. But even without having played her, I can say she is definitely not my least favorite hero from this wave. That is, sadly, Falcon. Just Falcon. Really?
Not even Maria Hill?
No, even Maria Hill's above Falcon. Falcon really pooped the bed for me. I keep trying him because I like the character and I keep wanting him to work, but every time I play it, regardless of aspect, it's just not very fun. Yeah, anyway, it's not about Falcon, it's about Silk. Silk, to me, I don't know. Maybe I'll try someday. I will, I'm sure I will someday, but haven't yet.
I like Silk a lot, actually.
Okay.
I think her discarding a card in Alter Ego thing is crazy. She's got some interesting cards. Some of her events are kind of weird. The one that you, like, 0 cost finds you a card that matches that is cool. I never feel like I use it as a setup. I feel like I don't always have it there where you can just be like, okay, I need to overkill this minion with my swinging Silk kick or whatever. But I do really like the killing the minion. So I've played her in like a minion killing build. I know, shocker for me. But in a couple aspects. But basically what you get to do is if the villain has a minion in their encounter set, you kill it, tuck it under yourself, and then you use eidetic memory whenever you draw an encounter card, and you just get the minion again. And then you can just kill the minion for value again, and do it again and again. And so then you basically have 3 cards tucked under you, or she can have maximum 3 or 4.
4, I think.
So you have 3 cards tucked under you that matter, and the other one's just going to be a stupid minion that you'll get forever. So first time I played Silk, I was against the custom Mr. Negative scenario from one of the guys in the community, and there's like a stupid 1/1/3 health guy, and I just put him out there, draw him back, put him out there every time. Eidetic Memory is a very cool card, and that is one of my favorite ways to use it, but also it's fun to stash like a salt under there for when you draw shadows, just to not do that. I think it's fun. I originally had planned to just stack 4 bad cards under her and then never use them, but she very much disincentivizes that. You want to be running through those cards pretty fast.
Okay, well, that is what we've been playing recently, listeners, viewers, folks out there. And now let's get into what the people are actually here for. And as the host and the head honcho of the People's Podcast, I am a appointed man of the people. I mean, I didn't choose this, it chose me. So as the man of the people, I'll make the decision. We're going to move to the card of the day. The card of the day is Frozen Solid. All right, here is the card, Villain Theory. If you wouldn't mind reading it for us, and then we'll discuss it.
Yeah, so this card is Frozen Solid. It is a 3-cost upgrade, condition and ice treated, and it is hero form only, attached to an enemy, max 1 per enemy. The forced interrupt says, when attached enemy would activate, discard Frozen Solid instead, then attach a set-aside copy of Frostbite to that enemy, and this also has a mental resource.
Yeah. So the first thing we always talk about is art here. Villain Theory, for those of the people out there who are listening to this, the real ones we call them, who are listening and not watching on the YouTube, would you mind describing what this art is? What's happening?
Okay, so Juggernaut is having a really bad day.
Hmm.
He is basically frozen in a giant block of ice. It's like a giant ice cube, and he's like inside of it. Uh, and it looks like he's maybe mid-step or something. It's kind of, the color scheme is quite muted because he's like in the ice. You can kind of just see like the gray kind of like shape of him. And yeah, he's not having a great time. For someone whose power is being unstoppable, this card has actually stopped him.
And that is a bit of a teaser for what we're going to talk about later with the abilities of this card, because I think that's quite apropos here. I do think I want to point out, when we're talking about the art, I quite like the color scheme. I know I've said this before, of Iceman's stuff, like the light blue and the white, and then the other slightly different shade of light blue. I really love like the border art for all of his cards, and it really fits with the art on the picture. Like it all is the same kind of tone of blue, which maybe makes sense because it's all ice, right? I mean, it's obvious. I should say that this card did come in the Iceman Hero Pack. It has not been reprinted since then. And the art is from Iceman Volume 3, Number 5 from 2017.
Yes.
So how do we feel about this art, guys?
I kind of like it. It kind of makes me think that when I play Frozen Solid, that is happening to the enemy. And that is like really insulting to the enemy, I feel like, and quite funny, almost quite cartoon-like. And that feels quite satisfying. So the art enhances my enjoyment of like playing the card, and I feel like that's one of the greatest compliments I can give.
Fair enough. LT?
I like it as well. I think it gets the point across. It's Frozen Solid. You see the enemy, Frozen Solid. It's
I think this is
kind of
one of the ruder cards in the card pool. Like it just feels rude.
Yeah.
It's like, you came to the party prepared. You brought your stalwart. You brought your steady. That's great. But you weren't ready for this. You're Frozen Solid. It just feels rude. And the fact that they chose Juggernaut for the art makes it feel even more rude because, like you mentioned, it is like the unstoppable guy who has just stopped. Don't care. You're frozen. I think the art is pretty, I don't want to say basic. It gets the point across very well, but there's not a whole lot happening here. It's just, Juggernaut in ice.
I think if I was to be really critical, like I could do with like maybe a little something slightly more on the color, even if it's just like more shading or like lighting. I don't know exactly, but I still do like it.
Yeah, I also like it. LT, do you have something else you want to say?
If we want to get really scientific,
Get it?
Juggernaut is kind of the perfect enemy to do this because he's unstoppable, which I don't know Juggernaut's powers, so I'm just going to go off on a tangent and I'm going to be confidently right. But he is constantly moving. That would mean kinetic energy to me. And freezing something, lowering its temperature, lowers its potential and kinetic energy. Just slows it down forever. So Juggernaut, Iceman's so cool. He's so frozen that he can stop the unstoppable. He can bring it down to its negative temperature.
I mean, he's an Omega level mutant, I believe, in the comics. And
Iceman is one of the
means.
most powerful mutants in the comics, which is funny. I'm not really sure why, but I'm not really sure what the scale of Omega level is, but I think it's like
It's enough.
Villain Theory, do you know what it is?
Well, my understanding of like Omega level is it means like almost limitless potential. Like the most, there could be like 20 ice mutants, but the Omega level, like if someone's Omega level with that ice power, that's like capped out, that's maximum, and it's like, very, very strong, and clearly strong enough to freeze Mr. Unstoppable here, which is very good.
Yeah. Okay, so thematically then, how do we feel about Frozen Solid? Does, the title and the keywords and the text, and does all of it come together to make it feel like one thematic piece? Villain Theory, what do you think?
In terms of theme, I'm giving this like a 10 out of 10.
Ooh, okay.
It's called Frozen Solid. Stops an enemy. regardless of all different things, it really literally just freezes them, and the picture reflects that. Like, I don't know what else I could ask for.
Yeah. And it has the ice trait.
It has the ice trait,
And the
and it leaves
condition
a
trait.
yeah. That's a bad condition to be in. But the frostbite, at least, if I was frozen solid, even if I got out of that, I would still be, a little bit frosty maybe. And it all
Yeah,
just
you
kind
might
of
lose a
works for me.
toe.
I could do. I hope not.
You might be
I mean,
frostbit.
but it's not good.
No.
I do feel like the mental resource, I'm not sure what resource it should be. Maybe energy? I don't know. The mental resource feels a
he's
little
outthinking
weird.
the enemy. You can't move, so we've defeated you.
I mean, I guess. I do think, I think theme-wise, right? Like, it does what it says. The art shows it. The title says it. The powers do it. It all kind of fits together here. Yeah, I think it's quite good. And I like that it's, we'll talk a little bit about the ability on it in the next section, but I do like that it's not just like a stun, right? It is just you are completely stopped from doing anything. And then it gives you a fry spot on the end, just like the tiniest little insult to your injury. I like that.
Yeah.
LT, you have something you want to say about the theme here? It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I agree with you guys. The theming is great. You free somebody solid, which means that no matter what, they're stopped.
And just theme-wise, I'm really glad that Iceman has this card, right? Like, this feels like a card that Iceman should have. So I'm really glad this exists. I think he has 2 copies of it, right? Which I think is probably correct, but I just love that as a powerful ice-based mutant, he's not just throwing snowballs or whatever or creating snow clones. Like, he is doing some serious work here. And this is not his best card, but I think it's probably his second best card in my book. This is just really good.
I have different opinions on like what his best cards may or may not be, but something I just wanted to mention, talking about, they could have just given him a stun. And before he was previewed, a lot of us assumed he was going to be like the ally version of him and be all to do with stuns, to be the stun hero. We had Psylocke being the confused kind of hero. And they made it so much more interesting with Frostbites and then Frozen Solid. I don't know if I think Frozen Solid is like, one of his best cards necessarily, but I think it's one of his most satisfying. This is such a satisfying card to play.
Yeah, this is, and we're going to talk about decks later and the deck that I brought, but I just love this card makes him, in my opinion, like solo viable against some of the really hard villains. Like when I was testing against Thanos or Magneto or some of these other ones, like you can just shut them up. Like you could just stop them. Like Thanos just isn't going to activate no matter how hard he tries, no matter how many stones he has. We're just not doing that today. So I do like, and it does feel very thematic. So let's shift it into power because Villain Theory, I think, I feel like, oh, go ahead, LT.
Last thing about theme. Again, on Juggernaut being in the art, this is one of the few things that can stop the Juggernaut villain. Because the Juggernaut villain is stalwart and he breaks his stuns all the time and he has all this because of his helmet. This is one of the few things that you can just do to him to stop him from doing that.
Just shut him down. So then, Villain Theory, I feel like you have some thoughts when it comes to the power here. So why don't you lead us off? How powerful is this card?
I think this card is a really interesting one to talk about power with, perhaps more than the other cards when I've been on the channel, because it varies incredibly heavily with like the scenario you're against, right? You mentioned Thanos. This is like the anti-Thanos card in my opinion. It's so good because it ignores his stalwart, and that means Thanos can't activate. If he doesn't activate, the Infinity Stones, they're gathering dust. They're not doing anything, and that's like the whole scenario is Thanos hitting really hard and triggering those stones, and now none of that is happening. So against Thanos, I think this card is like massively more powerful. But then we could like flip things to, let's say, fighting, I don't know, Mojo or someone, and he's got like an attack stat of 1. And I think like shutting down his attack, just talking about attacks here, is a lot less valuable. Although it does also block schemes, and I think that is maybe the thing I like most about this is it will stop an enemy scheming, and it lets this little 1/4 character, I mean more of Isolite, but it lets this 1/4 guy actually get to alter ego without having to worry about the scheme, even on a stable stalwart. So there are places where I feel like it just has value, and it's supposed to even like getting attacked and stopping something. You could use a tough status card to be very similar, but this doesn't risk the boost effect. It's got like the frostbite afterwards, things like that. So there's a lot of good things in its favor. The big catch for me is free cost on a card to stop one activation, and then there's a frostbite. But for me, I feel like that's a little bit more than I like to pay usually. So in certain situations where the activation is worse than normal, this gains a lot of value. But a lot of the time, this is too costly for me on a hero that I feel like is already very defensive.
Hmm.
But you're paying the premium for the value, for the versatility of being able to put it on anything. Also, it stacks with other debuffs, so you can put this on the enemy, also stun them, and then if you have like 1 or 2 frostbites on them, then they attack, get a third frostbite, don't attack again, then they attack again at -3, so probably not going to do anything, and then so your whatever your stun cost and your frozen solid is stop 3 full activations. That's a 3-player full turn, or in solo that's like the game. You've played 3 full turns by then.
I'll say one of the things that I really love about Frozen Solid is, apart from the theme of Iceman freezing things, I really love that, I use this, Villain Theory mentioned using this to flip down and ignore a scheme. I like to use this to flip down to really maximize how many frostbites I'm flipping in. So I love that you can get like, you put this on and then I stack 2 or 3, 4 frostbites down, and then I can let the villain not activate because of Frozen Solid. Discard this, put another frostbite on, and then next turn is when I generally try to flip down to maximize how many cards I'm shuffling with this alter ego ability. And then this is the one I often shuffle in the most because I do think it's his second best card. I think, but that value proposition changes as you're talking about different villains, right? Like with Claw, with a 0 attack, I think on this first side, if you're playing standard, like it's probably not worth it. You may not get enough boosts to make this card worth it. But, some of those tougher ones, definitely this is going to really come in clutch and allow you to A, stay alive, and B, avoid those schemes. I think for a character, you said he's quite defensive, Villain Theory, but I find Ice disincentivized to defend often, in my view, because when you defend, the frostbite falls off immediately. And he has a number of cards that want to interact with frostbite. So if you defend, yes, you have a debuff on that attack, but then on your turn, you don't have frostbites to interact with necessarily. And I think find that can make him suffer. So like this keeps those around as well.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think when I call him defensive, I mean, he wants to exhaust to defend all the time. I actually feel like there's 2 schools of Iceman players. Some people like defend all the time, and I feel like maybe me and you, and I don't know how Lazy Titan feels here, but I am like you. I want to get Frostbite into the right place. I don't want to be exhausted starting the hero phase. But with that said, he's got 2 frozen solids. He has Ice Wall. Even his resource generator, the power belt adds health on, and Ice Blast, chill out. A lot of the time, the frostbite will end up on the villain somehow. So he's not necessarily always has to exhaust to defend, and I try not to a lot of the time. And sometimes I do. It varies on the situation, but a lot of his things are just kind of given to lowering the enemy's damage and or scheming. Is kind of what I mean by that. And sometimes if a character's doing a lot of that throughout their kit, I'm looking for the options that can make more of an impact, if that makes sense. So I think just my style of not loving defensive stuff and maybe puts me off this card more than, say another player.
I mean, I love, you mentioned you enjoy heroes who lean into basic activations, and I think I agree. And, he is in a class of heroes very similar to Shuri in my mind that rely on those basic activations, but not because they're big numbers. It's not a Drax or a She-Hulk or a Thor even. It's relying on those basic activations for a secondary effect. And I think that's really interesting. So like Shuri wants to maximize them because you're just going to get more of those Black Panther upgrades, and he relies on them because he gets more of those frostbites. Unfortunately, he doesn't get them for thwarting, and defending feels, in my mind, not great because then it immediately goes away. So he feels almost railroaded into attacking, which can work for him, but I guess you can think of it as thwarting or threat prevention, right? If you're attacking and then frostbiting and then you flip down, they're scheming for 1 less, and in a sense, I guess that's threat prevention. It takes a few mental hurdles to get to that point, but you can think of it that way. Yeah, so I think But I think this is just really, really strong. The ability to lock down a villain, regardless of steady, regardless of stalwart, regardless of anything else. Some of them, like, it's the difference of staying alive and not staying alive, right? Juggernaut, Thanos, Venom Goblin, Ronin, some of these, like Ronin, just freeze him. Who cares? You know, like, that's crazy. Like, that is the difference in losing the game and not losing the game, right?
Yeah, I think like this card scales really well into the hardest villains, like Ronan, even like Fanaticism, Venom Goblin, and what happens after he attacks. Because him attacking, he can hit hard, but I'm not usually too worried, especially with like Frostbites around. But I don't want like the big attack and then the main schemed like ability to trigger. So no, in certain places like this card really is very, very.
Yeah. LT, thoughts on the power of this?
I agree. I think it's quite good. I think it gets better the lower the player count is as well, because it's just preventing more and more stuff. And it also gets better the harder the villain you're playing. So if you're playing solo Ronin, this is maybe the GOAT of all cards. But if you're playing solo Ronin, I respect you and you're a hero. But I think this card, 3 feels like a lot sometimes, but I think is very fair and well worth it. Because if you could get away with shutting down Ronin or Thanos or whatever for 2 cost, I think you'd feel like getting away with robbery. And I'm always more on the side of err on the side of caution. So I think this card's great. I also think that it also adds the Frostbite, so it just another defensive buff for later.
I'm on the record of saying this is his second best card, but Villain Theory, you seemed to disagree with that. Where do you think this ranks among his cards?
I haven't gone out my way to rank his cards, and I don't love his cards. A general theme for me about Iceman is I feel like all of his cards are somewhere between 1 resource, maybe like half a resource, more expensive than maybe I would like them to be. And he can discount them in a lot of ways, but it's kind of weird. Like if you can have a hero who can discount the card in a variety of ways, but then make everything expensive, it's like 1 step forward, 1 step back kind of thing. So it is what it is. What was the question? Was it where I rank this on sort of his
Yeah,
cards?
like where do you rank this? Like for me, this is pretty clearly his second best card. I think his top 2 cards in my mind is Cryogenic Perception and then this one. And then there's a bunch of other cards that are maybe situational. But you seemed to not necessarily agree with that. So I'm just curious where you find this for you.
I think I personally prefer Power Bout. I think I really like Ice Blast. And I have a love-hate relationship with the snow clones. Maybe
yeah.
a discussion for later. So I don't know. Like I'll be honest, that game I played with Iceman recently, with the deck maybe coming up. That I was really eager to try and play this card, but actually I didn't feel I could ever play it because there was so much to do on the board state that being able to play a 3-cost card just to stop 1 villain activation, I always had more important things to do in terms of like controlling the board, etc. That I just didn't actually end up playing this. So in that game, like this was, I think I played every other card he has, including Ice Slide and Ice Wall. Though if I had this, I might have played instead of Ice Wall. It just worked out that way. But for me, I want to do
Let's not
things.
hate on
and this-
Ice Wall. Okay, Ice Wall's good.
I got mixed feelings. You know what happened in that game? I got 7 damage on it out of 8, which meant it was primed to block like an extra attack in the best way possible. And I was so
Yeah.
happy I was so happy. But then, because I had Frostbites down, because I Ice Blasted a couple of minions, the villain ended up attacking for 1. So it just like melted the Ice Wall the precise amount, and I was very disappointed.
It feels bad.
But I kind of like those cards. They're just all a little bit costly, is how it feels to me. So I don't know. I think if I'm against one of the harder villains, it probably is one of his top 3 or 4 cards, maybe. So I do like it. I have a love-hate relationship, I guess.
I agree with you that all of his cards feel a little more expensive than they should be. And I mean, I think it's pretty well documented at this point. He has an economy problem. There's just no way around that. His cards are too expensive for what he can afford. He has a little bit of card draw, but it's just Cryogenic Perception and it relies on you finding it. And I just don't find that he can afford things unless you have to get team building exercise and Power Belt and Deft Focus comes out a lot and X Gene. Like once you have all these upgrades in play, then it feels good because you're playing 2 cards a turn and you're doing things. But he does feel very slow. He needs to get a bunch of stuff out to make him work. But I find that this is one of those cards that like lets you get to that point because it slows the villain down. On the other hand, to me is Ice Wall, which I consistently think is one of his worst cards, and I will rarely play unless I just don't have another play. I find the Ice Wall to be very overpriced.
I'm an Ice Wall believer.
It just costs too much.
It costs a lot, and I do kind of wish that it like maybe exploded for damage when you popped it or something if I'm going to pay 4 for it. But I think the value of pay 4, especially in a higher player count game, or really in any player count game. In solo, it might feel bad because you are losing a turn. But this stops an activation, maybe 2 with the Frostbite. Playing solo, the wall, you could just like tank hits every time, but it's not going to do the same. The wall isn't going to prevent 10, 12 damage every time. But if you are defending and playing like a little less defensively, but slightly defensively while with the Frostbites and stuff, the villain will be hitting you for like 1 or 2 damage. It just means you're not going to take damage for a lot of turns. And in larger player counts, it can push that even further where like I'm good, so I'm going to defend for me, and then you're exhausted or you need to be ready, so you can take 4, and then we do the wall, and then the wall isn't amazing. It's not incredible. It costs 4, which means it's already bad unless it kills the villain. But but I think it's better than people give it credit for, because I think there's a thing that I notice a lot is, I mean, I get it too. We've talked about the card gamer greed. The Ice Wall is the perfect anti-card gamer greed card, where it doesn't do anything, but it has a huge impact. But that impact isn't right away. So the average greedy card gamer like myself will say, this card's terrible, why would I pay 4 for it? Whereas like, if your turn is just going to be play an upgrade, play an ally, the wall probably benefits the 4-player table a lot more.
Here's my issue with the wall. I have a couple issues. First of all, it costs 4, which is not only incredibly expensive, but puts it in this magic place which is just beyond the reach of build support. So that feels bad. So like you can't build support this in. There are 2 other hero cards I can think of. Magnetic Bubble and the Telekinetic Shield. Telekinetic Shield costs 2 and prevents 5 damage, and you can play it in front of anybody, but it's only on that player. And the Bubble costs 3, gives you Retaliate, and prevents 6 damage. The Bubble is just better, in my mind, in every way.
For sure.
You can build support it. It gives you Retaliate. It prevents 6 damage, which is plenty. It's only for you. The wall prevents it for everybody at the table. But there's a lot of times when you'll play this in a 3 or 4 player game, and if you're the last player, by the time it gets around to you, the Ice Wall is gone. Like, you use your entire turn to play it, the Ice Wall is used up by the other players, and then I still have to defend for myself because the Frostbites are gone too. I get it. It's a selfless game. We're defending for the table. But if your deck isn't built around defending for the table, it can feel bad to like play this for your whole turn to get a little bit of reprieve and then get none, and it comes back to you and you get attacked. So the Ice Wall has all that going against it. It also, like you said, doesn't have a big flourish at the end, doesn't blow up into damage or something, which could have been cool.
I do kind of wish it did that. I wish it maybe did as much damage it was on it. No, that's probably too broken. But like, it did 3 damage or something when it explodes. That would be cool. Just like,
this isn't about
something.
Ice Wall. This is about Frozen Solid. So let's refocus here. We're getting off track. VT, go ahead.
I would like to use a little bit of talk about Ice Wall to bring us back to Frozen Solid.
I love it.
So Ice Wall, when I see a card that prevents 8 or 7 and then whatever else it takes kind of damage in the way it functions, something that's preventing like 8 damage, to me, particularly playing like Expert, and I love the crazy mod sets. I think maybe that's why sometimes Deadpool falls over more than I like him to when I play him, because I have crazy shenanigans going on a lot of the time. But Ice Wall, I see is blocking 2 attacks from the villain on Expert mode on average. And certainly quick strike minions can come in. There can be different like little like things that mix it up. Or like even a minion that you couldn't defeat, so it's kind of chilling around. But I see Ice Wall is blocking 2 villain attacks most of the time. And To me, it's only one cost more than Frozen Solid, which would stop one villain attack. They both leave a Frostbite at the end, so for one cost more on Ice Wall, I feel like I've stopped twice as many activations as Frozen Solid. And I do prefer Frozen Solid to Ice Wall. So this is kind of in defense of Ice Wall, but also trying to make my point a little bit about Frozen Solid. Frozen Solid is way more versatile. There's no boost effects as well. The old trio whole thing. It stops, Thanos' Gauntlet, all the stuff we talked about. But a lot of the time, Ice Wall is just as good. A lot of scenarios, a lot of villain activations. And it will block, two activations instead of one. So, kind of like that about Ice Wall. Do you think it's quite expensive and slow for a character I think is slow and struggles to afford stuff? And yeah, but that's kind of my. You see how Frozen Solid, only one cost different, but it's still preventing like half as many activations.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I think both these cards share in common that like they are expensive and slow for a hero who is already slow and struggles to afford things. So in that sense, they're problematic. Let's kind of transition into the fun of this card before we get to final thoughts. How fun is Frozen Solid? And we don't have to compare it to the Ice Wall, but if you want to talk about the Ice Wall, you can. LT, how fun is Frozen Solid?
Frozen Solid rules. You
Okay.
just kind of stop the villain from doing a thing, which there is very few better feelings in the game because we all like to play Marvel Champions. Obviously, that's why we host a podcast. That's why you're listening. It's the whole thing. So when the villain does fewer things, that means I get to play more Marvel Champions per Marvel Champions. So it's like I'm playing more Marvel Champions per minute. It's upping my efficiency, really. So the villain does fewer things, I do more things, and there's no better feeling than going to the villain turn, and you're like, okay, scheme, nope. Attack, nope. Okay, my turn. Great. Move it.
Yeah, I didn't follow everything you just said, but I agree with your last part.
Some people can't keep up. Some people aren't as intelligent, but it's fine.
I think this card is like, if we're going to compare it to Ice Wall, just way more fun. I agree with your last point, VT, that for one cost difference, you may end up getting like a larger benefit, and that can be true in terms of damage, not scheme, obviously. But there is something to the idea that Lazy Titan just so eloquently explained, which is that you just say nope. Like, it's just like the Bugs Bunny no meme, where you just get to say, nope, we're not doing that. Like, it doesn't depend on how many boost icons you get, like, for its survival. We're not doing it. That's it. We'll just take this card off and you're not doing it. And that feels good in a way that Ice Wall doesn't feel the same way. Like, you put it down and then like, oh, you prevent damage. Okay. But this just is like, just a hard no feels good.
Yeah. I'm going to jump on the back of this and say I agree. There's a whole thing, especially years ago before Steady and Star Wars was even a thing, where there's kind of in some parts of the community a very like anti-stun sentiment, like, oh, the villain is stunned, nothing is happening, just bypassing the game. Some people like stuns, some people don't, and that's absolutely fine. I kind of like them, but something about Frozen Solid is just another level of satisfying. It just shuts down anything, attack or scheme. If you're going to stop the villain doing something, I don't think there's any more satisfying way of doing it in the game than Frozen Solid. So in terms of fun, I always enjoy this. And like you said, it feels rude, and I enjoy that as well. I like to disrespect the villain if I can. So, if I can defeat the villain in an order where I use, let's say, an ally that I've mind controlled, a minion, sorry, I'll defeat them with their own minion. If I'm Magneto, I'll throw their own minion at them. I like to disrespect the villain, and I don't know what's wrong with me. And this card feels like it plays into that a little bit, which I particularly enjoy.
Yeah, it does feel disrespectful. How does this compare to a card that I know you are very negative on in the past, Webbed Up? So this shares a lot of DNA with Webbed Up to me, so I'm curious how you compare them.
Yeah, I think like even this and Ice Wall, let's say if Ice Wall is a focus card to stop 2 attacks, that's kind of how I feel about Webbed Up. And I don't like Webbed Up, and Spider-Man can definitely afford that more than Iceman can afford Ice Wall. So I'm not crazy about that. I'm not crazy about, yeah. I feel like it feels in a very similar way, but I think I prefer Frozen Solid to Webbed Up, just because often you'll have this card in your hand and it will be the only thing that will interact with, let's say, power bout and maybe team building exercise or something. And that makes this easier to play. And unlike Webbed Up for Spider-Man, which even in multiplayer, depending on the turn order, it can mess with you drawing cards from your hero ability or using backflip and so on. This doesn't have anti-synergy with Iceman. In fact, it actually has synergy. I like what you're saying. It helps you keep Frostbites on that villain and solo play notably to like flip down and shuffle more of your own cards back in. So I like this more. I like this. I do like this card. I just don't think I like it as much as you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any final thoughts before we get to final thoughts?
I don't think so.
Think one final thing.
One
I think,
final before
like
the
what
final
you were
thoughts.
saying, VT, about the anti-stun sentiment from early in the game. Maybe I'm just not as tapped in, but I feel like that sentiment isn't really there anymore because stunning is actually really hard because a lot of villains just don't let you. So you can stun lock people, and like those earlier villains, you can still stomp Rhino with a stun lock deck if you really want to. But like a lot of them are printed stalwart. Now it's more of a complaint about not being able to stun, and
I think
like stalwart and printed stalwart. And I think a lot of people got used to having a stun all the time as like a crutch kind of. And I think this card fills the niche. It feels so good because now it's doing a thing that's rare. Whereas like Webbed Up didn't feel as good early because it wasn't that hard to stun and it wasn't that big of a deal. They were attacking for like 5, maybe 6 tops. But if you can just Frozen Solid Ronin with his weapon on, so he's stalwart, nope, okay, cool. Don't have to deal with that for a minute. Or Thanos or Juggernaut or all these villains that now have this ability to just punch straight through. I think it feels a lot better. And then you also get to kick him where it hurts right at the end with a
I think early in the game, maybe you are correct. I think Webbed Up felt like an overpriced Mockingbird early on. I think the whole stun thing, I think what happened, to take like a meta look at it, is that stun lock decks, people developed stun locking decks, and then everyone was doing that for a while, and then everyone realized that that wasn't very fun. It wasn't the stun that wasn't fun, it was like you stun locking, which meant the villain never did anything, wasn't fun, and that's what people were reacting to because most gamers just can't control themselves. They found a thing to stun lock and they just couldn't stop themselves from stun locking all the time. Instead of saying like, maybe I won't do that. And they're like, well, this isn't fun. I can just keep them stunned the whole game.
Didn't stop to think if you should.
Right. Okay, so let's move to final thoughts. I'm going to let Villain Theory have the final word because he's the guest.
Ooh.
Lazy Titan, I'm going to let you go first today. Why don't you give us your final thoughts and give us a rating out of 10. Again, 5 is true neutral and all that stuff, right in the middle. It's not a failing score. Where do you score Frozen Solid?
I give Frozen Solid a 7.5. I like it. It's good. It does the thing that it does. It does what it says in the box every time. Like we talked about, it scales to the villains. The more difficult the villain, the more valuable this is. And I think that as villains inherently get more difficult because of just power creep, I think this card only goes up in value, which helps Iceman's longevity.
For me, I think what this card does that maybe Ice Wall doesn't, right, is it just flat out stops. So there's no boost abilities. There's no runaway, reveal another boost card that eats up the entire Ice Wall. There's nothing, exhaust your hero. Like, there's nothing that happens. There's just nope, and we move on. And I think that's super fun. I love the theme of it. Again, I think this is, if we're talking about most thematic cards, this is his most thematic card. Like, this is the one that you feel like Iceman has to have, the one where he puts you in an ice cube. That's got to be this card. For me, it's awesome. When I'm shuffling things in with this alter ego ability, it's very often going to be Frozen Solid unless I'm doing a damage push late in the game or something as, situational is happening. And especially in solo play, I think this makes Iceman really viable. So for me, this is a 9 out of 10. I think this is a great card. I really love Frozen Solid. I think the 3 cost is even okay. I think if it cost 2, it would almost be too good, and 4 would be unplayable. So I think 3 is where it has to end up. For me, it's 9 out of 10. BT, what do you think?
I think I'm kind of, in some ways, I'm more skeptical of the card than I think you guys are. But I do appreciate a lot about it, especially like the fun factor, the satisfaction as well. It just does what you want it to do. It does what, as you say, Iceman should do. Puts people in the ice cube, and that, in many ways, as I said like earlier in the video, in terms of like the kind of like theme or feel, like I gave it a 10 out of 10. But anything for me, I feel like is the cost. And certain cards are definitely more efficient than they should be, but you can look to very cheap cards like 0/1 cost cards that block like a whole activation. Maybe it's a specific kind. This is versatile. Maybe it's part of due to Iceman's overall like economy stuff as well that makes it struggle. But for me, I just feel like on Iceman, kind of like you said as well, Boom Guy. Sometimes he needs to get a few things on the board before he can really do stuff. Sometimes my hand is a couple of upgrades or things, and then like it's frozen solid and a resource card. I want to try and find a way to do something, and a lot of the time I need to do something, which pushes this card sort of down for me. And I think if its cost was, you know, maybe more competitive on a wider variety of villains, not just the ones that, okay, the activation is like crazy, I have to use it would be higher for me. But I have to rate it down due to when I'm playing out my hand, quite often frozen solid is, I need to be doing other things. That's how I feel. So it gets rated down a couple of points. But otherwise, I love this card. I love like the whole idea of it. So I think I'm gonna go for somewhere like the middle of you guys with maybe like an 8, maybe an 8.25, but we can call it an 8.
Ooh, okay.
I do like this card a lot.
I mean, I do agree that Iceman has what I would kind of describe as a negative play pattern. And I don't mean that in terms of your experience, although Villain Theory, you may talk about that, and maybe that is your experience with Iceman. But his central mechanic is about making the villain worse, and Frozen Solid is about making the villain not do something, and Ice Wall is about preventing damage. It's a very negative, like reactive experience rather than like I'm doing something and pushing and being proactive. So I think that style is just going to gel with some people and it's just not going to gel with other people.
Yeah.
And that's fine, but I think Frozen Solid fits in there. But overall, we still all rated this pretty high, so that's good to hear. We now are going to move into the decks that we built for today, and I will just reiterate. We did this for She-Hulk a few months ago. We did deep dive, and I built a new deck each week, and that kind of burned me out on She-Hulk. So what we did this time is I created one deck for Iceman at the beginning of this month, and then the rest of the weeks, including today, I'm going to be bringing out a different deck that I built for Iceman to kind of show off one that I built in the past, but not force me to rebuild and test so many decks in short order. So with that said, Villain Theory, would you like to go first today, or would you like to go second?
You let me go last on giving a score on Frozen Solid. So I feel like I should go first here and let somebody else have the last kind of deck talk, if that makes sense.
Okay, so then I will share your deck to the screen, sir, and then we will talk about your deck. So let's look at this right here. And here it is. This is your deck. And why don't you take it away? Can you read the deck for us and then we'll talk about it?
Yeah, so the deck is called Nice Man, which I don't know if it's a particularly inspired name for Iceman, but I feel like if you're playing this deck of mine, he's a nice man, and you're getting results that might get you saying "nice man" is what I'm hoping for. So it's a very multi-layered name in a way, and it's an aggression deck because Iceman comes with an aggression precon, and it comes with a little card called Surprise Move, and that is still probably to this day my favorite way to play him. I also surprisingly enjoy him in pool a lot, but Surprise Move is a card I really enjoy. Would you like me to read through the card choices?
Yeah, if you could just read, just the cards that you included, not his signature cards, and then we'll talk about them for people who aren't watching.
Yeah, so I don't know how people normally read them out, but I'm going to jump to the supports, and he has Utopia, which I feel like is a very common choice for Iceman, but he does want to ready, and he does come with 2 X-Men allies in his own deck, so I feel like he's just kind of begging for Utopia a lot of the time. You can build him in other ways, but we've got Utopia here. Then we've got Team Building Exercise, which of course helps pay for ice cards, and the X-Men cards here. And I feel like, I don't know if I should even, be talking about the deck before I read out the stuff here, but there's a few cards missing that I think people would expect, but there's a reason behind it. But then we've got Blood Rage, Combat Training, and Deft Focus as the upgrades. the normal 3 resource cards, Strength, Energy, and Genius. We've got a bunch of X-Men allies, which is Beak, Glob, Professor X, Shark Girl, Sunfire, and Triage. And there's one other ally with the X-Force trait, which is Hope Summers, but after she enters play, she gains the trait on your identity. So she kind of becomes an X-Men ally in that respect.
She also gets ice.
Yeah, she also gets ice for what that's worth. That's kind of funny. And then the events, there's 2 copies of Clobber, 2 copies of Precision Strike, 3 copies of Surprise Move, and 3 copies of Toe to Toe.
Yeah, so tell us kind of what's the strategy behind this deck? Like, how does it play?
So for Iceman, for me, and I think, like I said, you said this earlier, Boom Guy, sometimes it feels like you have to have a few cards on the board before Iceman can really do much of anything. His cards are expensive. Sometimes it's hard to play 2 of his own cards on a given turn without like prior setup. And for me, I, sometimes like to challenge myself. And if I'm in a high pressure scenario, Iceman doesn't always like it. It's not to say he can't do it, but I just hate not being able to make an impact, I guess. I don't have to have a super fast deck, but just a lot about Iceman feels very slow or very cumbersome or clunky. So I tried to make this deck really to kind of have a streamlined experience. And I must confess, when I played this deck, it was one of my favorite Iceman experiences. So,
Mm.
maybe a little bit more Iceman could move up in terms of enjoyment for me. But the main strategy here is twofold. One strategy, Iceman likes readying. We've got Utopia, we've got X-Men allies. But this is almost a necessary evil, although I do like the X-Men allies. I do like readying, so I do like Utopia on those allies. But really, this is an attack-oriented deck, whether it's basic attack or events. It's using cheap cards. So he's got a lot of cheap cards that you can play around his more expensive cards is a lot of the thought process here. I will say, if you're playing it, depending on your player count and team, you might kind of change out, the precision strikes or clubbers. You can like alter the deck to kind of suit the situation a little bit, but it's just aiming for these cheap cards. And I should also say this deck was kind of, really aimed at being a multiplayer minion slayer.
Mm.
Could be 2-player, could be 4-player, but it's its primary job. But as long as you've got those cheap attacks to mix in with his own stuff to kind of dance around his own cards, you're gonna have a good time.
So did you find 2 questions here? I noticed immediately martial prowess was not included. With 3 events that cost 1 or surprise moves an attack event, but there's 3 attack events here that you could spend that for. Did you find that that was missing? And second of all, did you find that you had enough minions in play without ways to summon them to make the strategy work?
In multiplayer, yes, I think you have enough minions, first of all, but it might, if you're going into a very minion scarce scenario, maybe you do want to like mix in a little summoning or something. But for the most part, it's kind of designed to be in a kind of a situation where you're going to find minions. Martial Prowess would be a really good add here. I tried to keep down the cost of the upgrades and supports, and I tried to keep down the quantity to be as few as possible. Because what I was finding is, I could have put X Gene in here. Even, it's not a resource generator, but with all these allies, you might think Boot Camp is really good. But I was finding getting these in my hand and then his own cards, and you're just trying to afford it. It was too slow for what I wanted. But with Toe to Toe and Precision Strike and Clubber and Arctic Attack, he definitely has, enough targets to consider Martial Prowess. But I was just like, his belt, Cryokinetic Perception gets you a card, Death Focus, Team Building Access. I felt like I put the, as much economy like the minimum requirement in there, and then I wanted options to do things. But Martial Prowess is probably one of the better additions you could definitely swap in for something.
And how did it play? Did it work, your strategy, the way you thought? Is it good, smooth deck?
It worked better than I expected it
Mm.
to. I didn't, get my typical Iceman game. I'll get more upgrades and things and play earlier, but like that's a start of the game. If I'm a multiplayer, sometimes I really feel like I need to be carried a certain way until I'm as effective as I want to be, and maybe other decks will be. But that wasn't the case here. I really liked toe to toe with him. Sometimes you have a frostbite on an enemy, and then you defeat the enemy, and it's wasted. But toe to toe weakens the enemy that you cause to attack. Toe to toe makes the enemy attack, and then you deal big damage. And I could like play chill out, put a frostbite on some poor unsuspecting minion, then go to toe with them, and basically doesn't hurt me or very little. I found that to be really fun. Again, I love surprise move, which when Iceman basic attacks someone, he puts the upgrade there, then surprise move increases your attack by 2, and if you defeat them, you ready up. It's just, 2 extra damage and a ready for Iceman a lot of the time. That worked perfectly. I didn't want to go Ultrigo a lot with this deck, so I ended up playing Ice Slide, and it stayed in the whole game. Obligation wasn't a problem. And between Frostbites and Precision Strike topped me up, stopped me needing to go Ultrigo really at any point, except, maybe once earlier in the game. And so, I mean, I think it all kind of came together really well.
I love that. LT, any thoughts on this deck?
I like it. I like a cheap event heavy deck. That's a favorite style of mine. So I love just slamming at events. I do think looks like there's probably 7 slots in this deck that are kind of going to waste. Something like we're playing this ally type. I don't know what that is. But if we could stop doing that, that'd be awesome. Other than that, I like it. I think it's good.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, good stuff. Villain Theory. I'll have links to this deck down below. Now I'm going to share mine. Mine is a deck that I have published previously, so you may have already seen it, and if that's the case, I apologize for nothing. Okay, so here we are. This deck is called Dr. Icelove. I published this last year sometime or early this year, I don't remember. This is Justice Iceman, so I'm going to read through and then we'll kind of briefly talk about. So it includes Blindfold, Eros, Forge, Professor X, Triage, and Wiccan. I have 3 copies of Clear the Area, 2 copies of For Justice, 2 copies of Impede, 2 copies of One Way or Another. Superpower Training. I have the 3 basic doubles, Energy, Genius, and Strength, and 2 copies of The Power of Justice. It has Team Building Exercise, X-Jet, and Utopia. Deft Focus, Justice Served, Sense of Justice, and Skilled Investigator. So this deck is primarily built for a solo experience, and it's built to be able to manage the threat and lean into the cards that he has, his signature cards, to deal the damage. So I tested this quite a bit against some pretty difficult villains, as it says there. Thanos, Mr. Sinister, Ronin, Dark Beast, Ultron, Strife, and Kang, all an expert. It did really well. Frozen Solid is one of the key cards in a lot of those harder matchups, which is why I'm sharing to talk about it in this episode, because, against things like Thanos and Ronin especially, you just leaning on Frozen Solid a lot to do a lot of the kind of essentially defending for you. Now, I do have a bunch of allies that are not X-Men, but they're all in here to kind of help us do things, right? Eros helps you to confuse some minions if there's out there, so you can flip down and leave them there. Blindfold allows us to kind of see what's coming up with the encounter deck. Forge is going to fish out some of those supports. Professor X is just clutch and classic and everyone's favorite crutch X-Men. Triage keeps us healthy, and Wiccan just is getting him to do a little bit of thwarting and damage. So they're in here, and it's not just like slapping the X-Men to ready yourself. One way or another helps you draw cards. Impede helps you thwart and then put a card back in your hand, which often he needs. Clear the Area helps you draw cards with Skilled Investigator. So it's not like an amazingly unique deck, right? It is a lot of standard Justice fare, especially in solo. Clear the Area, Skilled Investigator, like these are not amazing. I think Justice Served is a card that doesn't get used very often, but that I find is quite useful in certain heroes, and Iceman is one of those, right? Clearing something, readying yourself, being able to put out more Frostbite. I have a lot of events to do the thwarting because he's really disincentivized from using his basic thwart, so no heroic action or a heroic intuition here because I don't want to be basic thwarting. One way or another helps him get card draw, which he really needs. And then everything else is just kind of helping him to afford those expensive cards. For Justice is just a classic thwart card, nothing fancy. But yeah, Sense of Justice does a lot of work here, helping to pay for things. Def Focus, X-Jet also. And we do have Utopia in here, even though all the allies are on X-Men, because the other allies are useful and they're here to block. And then we do have enough X-Men with Forge, Professor X, the 2 Snow Clones, and Triage that Utopia was still hitting pretty regularly. Yeah, so that is Dr. Icelove. I think people have maybe seen this before, so I don't dwell on it for too long, and maybe you two have also seen this before, I don't know. But when I built it, I was quite happy with how it performed and being able to survive in a solo game, especially. And it's obviously themed around the excellent film Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, which is an awesome film if you haven't seen it. Thoughts on this one from either of you?
I like the deck. I think in many ways, like you said, it's sort of quote unquote standard Justice Fair. But I feel like that's all what Iceman needs. If you're going solo, there's kind of a gap in terms of like threat control, and this is what does it. And I also think Iceman, more than the average character, likes card draw because some of his cards are so expensive and his money problems. Cards are just money, but also more cards, more flexible in how you spend them. So I think things like clear the area one way or another and Skilled Investigator. I really like all of those things for him here. So, and I also particularly do like Justice Served, so that's really cool.
LT, thoughts?
I like it. It's a very similar, same idea of lots of cheap events, which I think is kind of just an Iceman thing. But I like Justice Served. I like Skilled Investigator is a great card. Always overperforms. And it's Justice Classics, which is kind of what you need to do in solo, especially if you need to rely on the classics.
Yeah.
They're classics for a reason, right?
Yeah, I mean, Skilled Investigator is one of those cards that if you're playing a Justice deck, I think you just put it in your deck, really, no matter what. It's one of those that I think is an auto-include in Justice.
It's super good.
To me, it feels like ready for a fight in Protection these days. It's just one that if you're playing Protection, you could certainly use at least one copy of Ready for a Fight. I do also really love, and I have to point out, this very symmetrical cost curve diagram. I mean, like,
Perfect.
how great is that? It's almost perfect. I do love seeing the classic shape there. Yeah, so again, there's lots of GIFs and silly references to this movie. If you feel like reading through that, I'll put a link to it, even though it's not a new deck. And that's the 2 decks that we had for today. Villain Theory, thank you so much for coming on and talking Iceman. Before we go, I would love to hear some of your final thoughts on your experiences with Iceman generally as a hero. Since you're not going to be here for the whole deep dive month, I'd like to hear kind of how have you enjoyed it? How did you enjoy testing these decks? What are kind of your final thoughts on the hero overall?
Yeah, Iceman for me, it's a weird one because I don't want to be, I set this up saying I'm probably the most skeptical guest you're going to have one about Iceman. But there are parts of Iceman I really love. I love the Frostbite mechanic and weakening the villain. Frozen Solid, from how I talked about it early on in the video, you might have been surprised by how I scored it, but that's really satisfying. There are parts of him that are really satisfying, and I really enjoy it when that all gets to come together. I think my final thoughts, kind of just amalgamation of what I said already. I just wish his cards were maybe like a half a resource or some of them a resource cheaper than they were. And I think he would shoot up like a whole tier, at least if I like ranking how much I liked him. Just alone. A card I haven't really talked about yet that I love for Iceman that I want to throw out there is Ice Blast. I love this thing. You choose a player, you put a Frostbite on all the minions they have, and then every enemy with a Frostbite on them takes 3 damage. But if you have Frostbites set up on minions engaged with other players, it will still damage them. It just itself, as Ice Blast, won't put the Frostbites there. So I like the kind of like interactive combo potential. I attack this minion, I attack this minion, then I target this player with the Ice Blast card, and everything is taking a ton of damage. Just in like a 2-player game here, I think I got like maybe 12 damage out of 1 Ice Blast, and I really, really, that's not always going to line up, but it did. And that's so fun for me. And I love the idea of when you use Ice Blast, it's kind of like this, Ice Blast, and all these enemies are left with like icicles hanging off them, and they're all like, got all this frostbites all over. I just think it's a really funny image, and that card uplifts Iceman a lot for me. If I play an Iceman game and I get to do a significantly good Ice Blast, I've had a good Iceman game. And if I haven't, maybe. So yeah, Iceman's really a tale of 2 halves. I find him slightly frustrating and clunky, but a lot of his cards and things he does are very, very fun.
Well, that was a beautiful segue, Villain Theory, because I would like to encourage everybody to join us next week for episode 83, where we talk about Ice Blast, which apparently is a favorite of Villain Theory's. And he did not know that that's the next episode, the final episode of our Iceman deep dive. So I'm excited to talk about that. Seems like you joined us for the wrong episode, Villain Theory, but hopefully it'll be a good one. So thanks again for being here. I appreciate it. Thanks for everything that you used to do for the community and all the videos that you used to do. I used to love your channel. Just kidding. You're still around. But go check out Villain Theory. He's on YouTube. He's everywhere that you would want him to be. He also has a podcast. Check that out as well. Lazy Titan, you were here too. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
That's all I need. I appreciate it. I was also here, and I said words about Marvel Champions, which is a card game.
That is a card game. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. We will see you next week to round out the deep dive. And for now, I'll say bye, everybody.